A story of a massive hairy creature tearing through a camp and leaving a man dead. You know who told that one? Teddy Roosevelt himself. In Oklahoma, a hunter was chased to his truck by a 7-foot rock-throwing ape, and a Penn State student was stalked by a giant monster he said looked like King Kong. These are real Bigfoot attacks reported by hunters. This first story is one of the earliest widely circulated Bigfoot accounts in American history. It was told by Teddy Roosevelt, of all people. Before he became president, Roosevelt spent time ranching in North Dakota and exploring the wilderness. In his 1893 book, The Wilderness Hunter, he recounts a story told to him by an elderly frontiersman simply referred to as Bowman. It took place in the Bitterroot Range of Idaho and Montana. Bowman and a partner were trapping in a remote pass when they set up camp in a small glade. After leaving for a bit to hunt, they came back to find their lean-to destroyed and their belongings scattered everywhere. At first they assumed it was a bear, but when they examined the tracks they realized the creature had been walking around on 2 legs. Not impossible for a bear, but not something they normally do for very long. Well, that night Bowman was woken up by a strong odor. That's when he saw a massive shadowy figure at the entrance to their camp. He fired his rifle, but missed, and the creature vanished into the darkness. The men spent the night on high alert, and in the morning found the lean-to destroyed again, with 2-legged footprints leading away. Over the next day, as they collected traps, Bowman's companion was killed. The attacker was described as a monstrous half-human, half-beast creature that apparently struck silently from behind, breaking his neck and biting his throat without consuming the body. Bowman abandoned everything but his rifle, and he fled. Now, Roosevelt made it very clear in his book that Bowman was this stoic, experienced frontiersman, not one to get spooked easily. But as he told Roosevelt the story, his voice quivered. He seemed genuinely traumatized. In 2002, a hunter in Choctaw County, Oklahoma, reported being chased back to his truck by a Sasquatch. His report was shared by the North American Wood Ape Conservancy. It was dusk. He was following the railroad tracks when he heard something moving behind him. Now, like most of these cases, he assumed it was a bear at first. But when he looked back, he saw this large bipedal creature moving back into the woods. It was about 7 feet tall, with a long torso and arms with dark fur, making grunting sounds like a hog. Moments later, the thing started hurling rocks at him. Of course, he bolted back to his truck. The hunter also mentioned an old man by the lake who shot at a very similar looking creature, only to have more return and throw rocks and sticks at his house. Other loggers in the area had also told similar stories about strange, aggressive creatures roaming those woods. Just back in February, a Penn State student known only as MK to the media was hunting raccoons in the Pennsylvania game lands. While walking along a creek, he felt uneasy, like something was watching him, and he noticed strange sounds, plap, 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 like something was dropping into water, along with bubbling noises in the creek. As it got darker, MK heard a sharp knock against a tree and realized something was following him. He tried to keep as calm as possible as he headed back toward his truck, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being stalked. Thinking it may be a person who wanted to do who knows what, he decided to call a friend on speakerphone, asking him to meet him and bring his AR-15. Then about 40 yards away, he saw it. It was a massive creature standing on 2 legs. It had gray skin, a receding hairline, and a very muscular build. The thing had no neck, and its face, as MK said, looked like King Kong. He only got a brief look at it before it disappeared back into the trees. Fortunately, he did make it back safely to his truck, but he was pretty shaken up. In May of 1971, Bobby Ford of Fouke, Arkansas, claimed he was attacked outside his home by a massive ape-like creature. Ford described it as 7 feet tall, 3 feet wide across the chest, with red eyes and heavy, labored breathing. According to him, the beast put its arm around his shoulder and tried to grab him. Terrified, Ford managed to tear free and sprinted so fast that he didn't stop to open his front door, he just crashed straight through it. He was treated at the hospital for scratches and shock. Now, before this, Ford said the creature had been hanging around his property for days. His wife, Elizabeth, reported waking up one night to see a hairy arm with claws reaching through a window, and she also noticed its glowing red eyes. On the night of the actual attack, Ford, his brother, and a hunting companion claimed they spotted the figure near the house with a flashlight. They opened fire on it. and thought they saw it collapse, but when screams rang out from the women inside the house, Board ran back. And that's when the creature ambushed him. Deputies investigated and found strange three-toed tracks and claw marks on the porch. Soon after, reporters Jim Powell and Dave Hall visited the scene and found the Ford family were packing up, leaving the home they just moved into. Powell's article coined the name Fouke Monster. Within months, the story spread like wildfire. The following year, it inspired the cult film The Legend of Boggy Creek, which is really worth a watch if you're into Bigfoot type stuff. There are not a lot of genuinely spooky Bigfoot movies out there, but Legend of Boggy Creek is definitely one of them. In 1924, Canadian prospector and woodsman Albert Ostman went on a vacation near Toba Inlet in British Columbia. He'd heard stories of what locals called man-beasts in the area, but he dismissed it all as superstition. One night, though, Ostman claimed he was abducted while in his sleeping bag by a large, hairy creature who carried him across the wilderness for 3 hours before finally stopping at a plateau. And that's where Ostman encountered a family of 4 of these creatures, 2 adults and 2 children. Apparently, that's where he was kept for 6 days. According to Ostman, though, the creatures, they weren't aggressive, they were just keeping him there. He just watched as they went about their daily lives, also giving him what he described as sweet grass to eat. Ostman eventually escaped by feeding the large male some tobacco, making it groggy and then running off. He didn't come forward with his story until over 30 years later in 1957. He was scared everyone was going to think he was crazy. Portlock, Alaska. It used to be a busy little salmon cannery town on the southern coast, but by the 40s it was completely abandoned after a string of terrifying attacks. And I mean terrifying. This was not a bear or a wolf. It was something later dubbed the Portlock Sasquatch. The stories, they go back decades, as far back as 1905. Workers said something massive stalked their camps at night, leaving tracks and scaring people off. Every summer it seemed to come back, and hunters who wandered too far into the woods, sometimes they just never came back. In 1931, a woodchopper was found dead out in the forest. Witnesses said he'd been killed by a single blow. It was way too much force for any normal man to have pulled off. Over the next 10 years, there were multiple incidents. People claimed the thing was dragging villagers off into the trees, leaving mangled bodies behind. Nobody felt safe. Eventually, everyone packed up and left, turning Portlock into a ghost town almost overnight. But let's not move on from the Portlock Sasquatch just because, like I said, there were tons of incidents. Not long after that woodchopper was found dead in 1931, hunters heading out for moose noticed that a set of moose footprints had just stopped, and in its place were larger footprints, over 18 inches long. The whole area was torn up too. Tree branches were snapped, there was blood everywhere, but there was no sign of the moose. The only tracks leading away were those massive prints, vanishing once the ground turned rocky. Before long, more of these tracks started popping up around Portlock, and it wasn't just footprints. One local said he actually saw a giant hairy man tearing apart the fish wheels they used to process salmon. The man ran to grab his firearm, but when he came back, the creature was just standing there, staring at him. That creeps me out. Then it turned around and just walked off. After that, sightings became constant. These were folks who lived around bears, wolves, and mountain lions every day though. They knew the difference between normal predators and whatever this thing was. During a training exercise in the forests of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, his unit often spent weeks at a time in the wilderness. These were field operations, long stretches of patrolling and camping with only rifles loaded with blanks. According to him, strange things kept happening during those nights. The men sometimes spotted glowing eyes in the tree line, or they'd see vague figures through their night vision gear. They would hear knocks echoing from the woods or movement just beyond the perimeter, but nothing ever showed itself. One night though, around 3 a.m., 2 Marines were on watch while the rest of the unit slept. Both men saw shapes moving about in the darkness. Then small rocks started landing near them. Thinking it was a rival unit trying to ambush them, they quietly woke the others up and set up a defensive line. They opened fire with blanks, and that's when 2 massive, upright creatures stepped into view. One shoved over a tree and let out a deep growl that absolutely shook everyone there. When daylight came, they searched the area and found huge prints around the knocked-over tree. King Tiger IV admitted he'd always been skeptical about Bigfoot, but after that, made him a believer, and to this day, he struggles to go into the woods. In 1978, the Caton family of Minerva, Ohio, reported a terrifying encounter with this massive hairy creature near their home. They claimed it threw rocks at their house and left behind huge footprints in their yard. This was not a one-time event. Neighbors also reported seeing the same beast lurking in the area. The wave of sightings became known as the Minerva monster case, and it drew heavy media coverage at the time. Former Stark County Sheriff Jim Shannon, who responded to one of the Catons' calls, later said they were terrified. "I will always believe them that they saw something, it's just, what did they see?" In July of 1924, 5 prospectors, Fred Beck, Marion Smith, Roy Smith, Gabe Lefevre, and John Peterson, reported a terrifying encounter with what they referred to as, quote, mountain devils near Mount St. Helens, Washington. It became known as the Ape Canyon Attack. The men had been mining when they noticed unusual thumping sounds at night and massive 14-inch human-like footprints around their camp. One morning, Fred and Marion saw a 7-foot-tall hairy creature near a spring. They fired their rifles at it but missed, and the creature retreated back into the woods. That night, the men were supposedly attacked at their cabin by 3 large ape-like creatures. The beings threw rocks and pounded on the walls and roof, trying to break in. At one point, one of the creatures grabbed an axe through a gap, but the men managed to wrest it away. The attack lasted 5 hours until dawn, when the creatures finally retreated. As the men cautiously stepped outside, Fred spotted one creature on the canyon edge and fired at it, sending it tumbling into a gorge. The prospectors quickly left the area and reported the incident to a ranger, but the body of the creature was never found. The story spread nationwide though, and Ape Canyon became a famous Bigfoot site. All that said, I've been your host James, and I'll catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.